Could the Cubs' relationship with super agent Scott Boras be affecting their ability to sign Cody Bellinger? Well, according to Jesse Rogers, a guy we like and respect and a person we've had on this podcast, the answer to that is yes. We're going to talk about it, give our opinions. Thanks for hanging out with us here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. That's a great way of saying go Cubs. Let's get this thing started. Everybody, welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. I'm Mick Gillispie at Broadcaster Mick, and it is great to see you guys as we talk Cubs baseball. And let's get into this. This was really interesting because we're keeping an eye on Cody Bellinger like a hawk. I mean, we're watching because I'm expecting him to re-sign. I think a lot of you guys are expecting him to re-sign. But Jesse Rogers, who is our friend from, known Jesse a long time, and he's on ESPN 1000 in Chicago, and then he's on ESPN. He's a Cubs expert. He says it's 51-49 that the Cubs are able to sign Cody Bellinger back. Now, I would have handicapped this at least 75-25. But the reason that he feels like that is the Cubs' relationship with Scott Boras, which is really interesting because the Cubs haven't signed a lot of Scott Boras clients, right, over the years. And I'm sure that it's just not the Cubs, but I'm sure there's other teams that kind of feel the same way, whereas the last thing you want to do is be held hostage by an agent. And Scott Boras has kind of made a reputation off of being a tough negotiator. He's a former Cub, which is pretty funny as a minor leaguer, I think, right? But he's made his mark as an agent. He's gotten a lot of his clients very lucrative contracts. But I think that in the process, he's alienated a lot of the fan base. There's a lot of people that get in our comment section every time his name's brought up and can't stand him. And I think that they can't stand him out of the aspect of looking at what's best for the game. And in the NFL, you feel like a lot of the deals are what's best for the game. And I think that that's why the NFL game is flourishing right now, because the rosters aren't held up by some of these contracts where guys aren't living up to their contract. They can be released. And our example of that, obviously, is Jason Hayward, who did not live up to the contract that he got. Now, was he there physically? Yeah. But was he producing? No. And I think that as fans, you just want to have the best players out on the field that you can possibly get. And a lot of these dollar figures, they really seem so, how do I put it? They seem so astronomical when you look at it, but at the same time, it's not your money. So you're going, well, you know what? If you give a guy $200 million, who cares? You're going to make it back. It's still $200 million you got to make back, right? And we've talked about that before as well. But with that said, great players like Cody Bellinger bring people to the stadium. And Cubs fans, we show up whether the team's good or bad, right? And I think that that's kind of a rub on a lot of Cubs fans as well. It's like, we're there, maybe not to the attendance amounts that we saw when the Cubs were competing for World Series, but always one of the top attended teams just because of the loyal fan base that the Cubs have. And and the tickets are expensive, and there's a lot of money being spent there on concessions, and then there's concerts that go on. So you know that the money's available, but if you're signing someone, you want to get the value back, right? And it really feels like Scott Boras could care less about the fan, could care less about the owners, and is solely focused on basically trying to get every red penny from an organization. And so the perception from the fans, I think, is shared by some front offices. And I don't know if the Cubs are there or not. I've never had that conversation with them before. But I know that if I was in their spot, that negotiating with someone who is solely interested in basically getting a deal for their guy that's to the point where you feel like it's unfair for you would be annoying, right? As Chad would say, in the catfish, he's always saying annoying, right? But sometimes you have to work those deals to get the best possible players, right? So when I heard Jesse say that on Waddle and Sylvie, I'm thinking, wow, could this possibly be what's going down right now? Or is his perspective that way because the Cubs haven't made a deal with Boras clients in the past, although they did sign Bellinger last year to a 1-year contract. But this is a long-term deal, and there's a lot more involved in this. So it is interesting to see. Now, I feel like this is Boras basically, and we've talked about this over and over again, I feel like he's trying so hard to grasp this market, and I don't think that the market is where he wants it to be for Bellinger. And honestly, with the decline in TV revenue, you're taking away a lot of the options that you would have, as far as other teams. Like the Clevelands aren't going to be spending money like this anymore because they're not getting that excessive television revenue. And honestly, as long as linear TV continues to decline, then salaries are going to decline with it eventually because there's going to be less teams in the market for marquee players like Bellinger. But it's interesting to see how this is going down. And that is a perspective that I'll tell you, I really like Jesse. You guys know he's been on here before. I'm going to invite him back on again now. I think that just to get his point would be interesting. But I've heard stories that Scott Boras only wants to negotiate with team owners. But I just can't see a scenario where Tom Ricketts is negotiating instead of Jed Hoyer. That's just not his style. As a leader, there's different ways of doing it. Think about the Dallas Cowboys, right? Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson was the Cowboys head coach when they were great, right? Back in the 90s. They were in the middle of a dynasty. And Jerry Jones, the owner, basically stuck his head in there so much that Jimmy walked away and Dallas hasn't won a Super Bowl since his fingerprints left, right? And now Jerry's made himself the GM and he's the owner GM. Go back and watch his video of him crying after the Cowboys blew it again this year. And there's a lot of frustration because just because you're the owner doesn't mean that you're a good GM. Doesn't mean that you're a good head coach. And he messed up one of the best dynasties of all time because of his meddling. Tom Ricketts is the opposite of that. He's not hands-on. He hires people and lets them do their job. And that's what he's doing with Jed. That's what he did with Theo. That's what he's done with Crane, who's the business side guy and has kind of been the architect of a lot of the things that you see, including the renovations to Wrigley, the building, next door where they have all their offices, the rooftops, all of that stuff that, when you go downtown and you go to a Cubs game, Crane's behind a lot of that. And he's also a guy that helps oversee the budgets, But Tom's not the kind of guy that's going to Jerry Jones it. He's going to trust these guys. So if Scott Boras is the type of guy that has to negotiate or wants to negotiate with an owner, that's going to slow things down because I don't think that's a possibility. I just don't think that's going to happen. Could be wrong. That's my gut feeling, knowing everyone involved. The last thing I want to say, though, is this. I get the players wanting to maximize their deals. I get that they are thinking, hey, this might be the last time I ever get paid. this may be my last contract. I want to get the best contract that I can possibly get, feel good about everything, and, and obviously move on with my career one day and feel like I've got financial security. Now, when you're talking about the difference between $200 million and $150 million, I don't think that really plays in. I just don't. I think there's sometimes you can take too much, right? And I think that's kind of the mentality that the players have gotten, the reputation that they want too much, that they don't want to give back to the game. They want what they want, and Scott Boras kind of represents that. And to me, I'm not putting that on the Cubs. I'm putting that on the player's agent. Where if your agent is to the point where teams don't want to negotiate with him, if that's true, then that's on your agent. And you start eliminating teams like the Cubs with other teams like Cleveland that are going to be out of it because of the situation with their TV contracts. You're really going to limit the pool of teams available to pay you the money that you want. So I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I want this deal to get done, and I still think it will get done. I'm still going to stay at 75-25. And look, Scott Boras is getting up in years. I mean, who knows how long until he retires from doing this. But I don't think it's good for the game, and it's definitely a bad look when you're an agent that teams don't want to deal with. Because at the end of the day, you're asking them to pay you. They're not, So love Jesse Rogers, though. They do a great job at ESPN 1000. And I thought that was a great clip and something definitely worth talking about. One other side note, I didn't get to this in yesterday's show. How cool is it that the Winter Classic, that the Blackhawks are going to play a hockey game at Wrigley Field? That, to me, is super cool. And having gone to see Dead and Company at Wrigley Field, hating that I missed Tom Petty there because I had, it was prior commitments, we'll call it. But I love the events that they have at Wrigley outside of Cubs games, whether it's football games, whether it's concerts, hockey game. It's just a fantastic venue. It really is a cathedral. And that's going to be an awesome experience. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are getting your tickets ready. Get me one. I'll come sit with you and drink a cold beer. Hey, thanks for hanging out. Again, make sure that you like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Thanks for hanging out with us. And we're following this thing. Don't get in the comment section and think that the Cubs aren't going to try to sign Bellinger. I don't think Bellinger really has the option of not. He's getting pressure from the players. He's getting pressure, I'm sure, from his family. He's getting pressure from the fans. He knows he's a great fit in Chicago. And the money that he doesn't make in this contract, he's going to make it back on endorsements because he becomes I've said this, he becomes the face of Cubs baseball. And that's a big deal. That really is a big deal. You're the face of one of the biggest brands in sports. So anyway, guys, thanks. Comment section, keep them coming. And we'll talk to you again real soon.